The knock came just as the sun slipped behind the hills, turning the open land the color of rust and shadow. The rancher had not expected anyone. Folks did not come this way without reason, not at that hour. I stood still for a moment, listening to the wind brush the tall grass and the distant low of cattle settling for the night. Then the knock came again, softer this time, almost unsure. He wiped his hands on his work pants and walked to the door, unaware that the next few moments would change the shape of his life. When he opened it, a woman stood on the porch, her figure framed by fading light. She carried no bag, no coat worth mentioning, and no expression that gave her away. Dust clung to the hem of her dress, and her boots looked like they had known more road than rest. She did not introduce herself. She did not explain why she was there. She only asked if he had work or a place she could stay for the night. Her voice was calm, but there was a careful edge to it, like someone used to weighing every word. The rancher studied her longer than manners allowed. He had learned to read people the way he read weather, by what they showed and what they hid. This woman hid almost everything, yet there was no fear in her eyes, only tired resolve. He told her he had a spare room and chores that always needed doing. He said she could stay until morning and see how it felt after that. She nodded once, as if she had not expected more. Inside, the house was plain and clean, built for use, not comfort. A table scarred by years of meals and work stood near the window. A kettle sat warming on the stove. The woman glanced around, taking it all in with a look that suggested she had learned not to grow attached too quickly. He offered her water, then stew. She ate slowly, thanking him without lifting her eyes for long. He did not ask where she came from. She did not offer. Silence settled between them, not awkward but watchful. Outside, the ranch lay wide and quiet, fences stretching toward the dark. The rancher realized how long it had been since anyone else had sat at that table. The thought surprised him. Loneliness had become such a steady companion that he no longer noticed its weight. After supper, he showed her the spare room. It was small, with a narrow bed and a window that faced the barn. She set her boots by the door neatly, as if order was a habit she clung to. Before closing the door, she thanked him again, this time meeting his eyes. There was something there, a question she did not voice. He told her to rest. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Sleep did not come easy for him that night. The wind rattled the windows, and every sound felt sharper than usual. He lay awake, thinking of the woman down the hall and the road that had brought her here. People did not arrive with nothing unless they had left something behind. He wondered what she was running from, and why he cared. Morning broke clear and cool. The woman was already awake, standing in the yard, watching the horses. She moved with an ease that spoke of familiarity, not fear. When he asked if she knew her way around animals, she said she learned wherever she stayed long enough. The answer was honest and empty at the same time. He put her to work mending a fence and showed her where tools were kept. She worked without complaint, hands steady, eyes sharp. By noon, he saw that she was not pretending to be capable. She was capable. The land seemed to accept her, and that mattered more to him than most things. Over the next few days, she stayed. They spoke little of the past and more of the work ahead. The rancher found himself listening for her steps in the morning and glancing toward the barn in the evenings. She fit into the rhythm of the place as if it had been waiting for her. Still, there were things that did not fit. She never spoke of family. She never asked about neighbors. She stiffened at distant riders and watched the road longer than necessary. One afternoon, while fixing a gate, he asked her where she planned to go next. She paused, then said she had not decided. The road had always told her where to go before. For the first time, she sounded unsure. The rancher nodded and said the road did not always know best. She gave a small smile at that, the first real one he had seen. As days turned into a week, small moments began to stack up. Shared meals, quiet laughter over a stubborn mule. Evenings on the porch, watching the sky change colors. The rancher felt something shift inside him, something he had thought long settled. Opening his door had been an act of kindness. Keeping it open was becoming a choice. Yet the sense of unease never fully left. One night, the dogs barked at something unseen. Another time, she woke from a dream and sat on the edge of the bed until dawn. He did not press her for answers, but he began checking the fences more often and locking the doors at night. Protection came naturally, even before he admitted there was something worth protecting. A neighbor stopped by with news from town, strangers asking questions, men who did not belong to the land, carrying papers and opinions. The rancher listened and thanked him, his mind already turning. When he told the woman, her face went still. She said it was probably nothing, but her hands tightened around her cup. That evening, she stood by the window long after dark. When he asked if she was all right, she said she had hoped the past would forget her. The rancher understood then that whatever she carried was not light. He told her she was safe here, believed it, even as doubt crept in. Da-da-da-da-da-da. The ranch had always been his refuge, a place where work made sense and silence healed. Now it was something else. It was a shelter he had offered without knowing the cost. He wondered what would happen if the past came looking. He wondered if he was ready to stand in its way. Late that night, a sound drifted across the land. Hooves on the road, slow and deliberate. The rancher rose and went to the porch, scanning the darkness. The sound passed without stopping, but the air felt changed, charged. When he turned back, the woman stood behind him, her face pale but resolute. She said there were things she had not told him. She said she would understand if he asked her to leave. The rancher looked at her, really looked, and realized that somewhere between the knock on the door and this moment, she had become part of his life. He told her to speak when she was ready. He told her the door was still open. She took a breath, steadying herself, and began to speak. Just as another sound rose from the road, closer this time, carrying with it the promise that the quiet days were about to end. The sound on the road faded before either of them moved. It left behind a silence that felt heavier than noise. The rancher stayed at the door a moment longer, listening with his whole body, then closed it gently and slid the bolt into place. The woman let out a slow breath and sat at the table, hands folded tight. She looked as if she had reached the edge of what she could carry alone. She began with the simplest truth. She said she had learned to leave before questions found her. She said that staying meant risking being known, and being known had once cost her everything. The rancher did not interrupt. He poured water and set it between them. The lamp cast a warm circle on the table, making the rest of the room feel far away. She told him she had grown up working land that did not belong to her, learning early how promises could be bent by those who held papers and power. She spoke of a dispute that began small and grew sharp, of a signature asked for when there was no choice to refuse. She did not name names yet. She said only that the past had learned how to follow her, using polite words and official seals. The rancher felt anger rise and pressed it down. He had seen that kind of thing before in quieter forms, and he knew it rarely ended clean. He asked her one question. He asked if anyone had hurt her. She met his eyes and said no, not in the way people expected, and yes, in the way that lasted longer. It was enough. Told her she could stay. Said whatever came would be faced here, not on the road. The words surprised him with their steadiness. The next morning, he changed the way the ranch moved. It was subtle, the kind of change only the land would notice. He brought the horses closer, rotated pasture use, and kept tools within reach. He asked her to keep the books, a task that required trust. She accepted without comment and proved careful and precise. Numbers told their own stories, and she read them well. Days passed with a quiet edge. They worked side by side, learning each other's habits. He rose early and favored silence until coffee had done its work. She sang under her breath while mending, a tune without words that lifted the air around her. They laughed once when a gate refused to cooperate, and the sound startled them both with how easy it felt. From another angle, the land watched. Tracks appeared near the south fence and disappeared just as quickly. A rider paused on the ridge one afternoon, a dark shape against the sky, then moved on. The rancher noted each sign and said little. He did not want to turn worry into fear. He wanted to keep it useful. A neighbor came by with mail that had missed its mark. Among the letters was one addressed only by description, not name. The rancher held it a long moment before opening it. Words inside spoke of meetings and clarity, of matters to be resolved. Asked for cooperation. It offered nothing else. Burned the letter in the stove and watched the ash settle. When she asked what it was, he said it was a request that did not deserve an answer yet. That night, she woke from a dream and sat on the edge of the bed until dawn. The rancher heard the floor creak and went to the kitchen, where he found her staring into a cold cup of coffee. She said she had dreamed of fences falling, said fences could be mended, She nodded, not fully convinced. As the week wore on, the town sent its signals. Supplies took longer to arrive. A clerk asked questions that reached too far. The rancher kept his replies brief. He knew how rumors fed on attention. He also knew silence could invite its own trouble. They spoke more openly now, if not fully. She told him she had learned to make herself small, to pass through places without leaving a mark. He told her he had learned to stand still and let storms pass around him. Their lessons met somewhere in the middle. The ranch became a place where both could practice something new. One afternoon, while riding the boundary, they found a marker stone shifted out of place. It was not an accident. The rancher set it right and pressed the earth firm around it. She watched him do it and felt something steady inside her answer back. The lines mattered, not because they divided, but because they told you where you stood. Another letter came, delivered by hand this time. The messenger would not linger. The letter named a place by the creek and a time before dusk. It said that if matters were not discussed, they would be decided without them. The rancher folded it and placed it on the table. He did not ask her what she wanted to do. He asked her what she knew. She told him the name at last, speaking it carefully, as if it could bruise the air. The name belonged to a man who had learned how to win without appearing to fight. He owned land and influence and a talent for patience. He had been right once, she said, and wrong since. The rancher listened and felt resolve take shape. He said they would not be decided without. They prepared without turning it into ritual. He chose the horses that would hold steady. She gathered the papers she had kept folded and dry all these months. They agreed on the route and the signals they would use if the talk went sour. They did not speak of fear. It was there anyway, useful and sharp. In the meantime, small kindnesses continued. A neighbor dropped off bread. A child waved from a passing wagon. Rancher fixed a hinge and felt the rightness of simple work. She stood at the window in the evenings and watched the light go, learning how this place held dusk like a promise. The night before the meeting, the dogs would not settle. The rancher walked the yard and found nothing. He came back inside and found her waiting. She said she would not leave, no matter how the talk went. He said he would not ask her to. They sat together until sleep took them in pieces. Morning came gray and close. The creek ran higher than usual, the water loud with its own purpose. They rode out together, quiet but aligned. As they neared the cottonwoods, voices carried on the damp air. Shapes gathered there, men with hats pulled low, papers tucked under arms. The rancher felt the old pull to step back and refused it. They dismounted and joined the circle. Words were exchanged, polite and careful. Maps were spread, lines traced. Claims were made that sounded solid until you listened closely. The rancher said little at first. He watched faces and hands. She listened, eyes steady, waiting for the right moment. When she spoke, it was with clarity. She laid out her history without ornament, dates and places, what was signed and why, who stood by and who did not. The name landed and stayed. The creek surged, water licking at boots. A man with standing asked for the papers. Another asked for time. The rancher stepped forward then and spoke of work done and taxes paid, of fences mended and land respected. He spoke of shelter given because it was right, and of a future that would not be traded for convenience. He did not threaten. He did not beg, stated. The circle tightened. A rider arrived late and listened with care. Questions cut through the fog. Doubt found a foothold where certainty had stood. The rain began, light at first, then steady. The land seemed to lean closer. The talk pressed on, tension wound tight. The rancher felt the moment nearing the edge where everything would tip. She stood beside him now, close enough to feel the warmth of her arm. Whatever came next would decide more than lines on a map. It would decide whether opening a door could truly lead to a future, or whether the past would claim its due. Rains softened the edges of everything, turning voices low and faces harder to read. The creek swelled against its banks, a reminder that land answered to more than paper. The men by the cottonwoods shifted their weight, boots sinking slightly, as if the ground itself asked them to choose where they stood. The rancher kept his shoulders square. He felt the pull of the place he had worked for years, the fences set by hand, the seasons counted by calves and hay. He also felt the quiet strength at his side, the woman who had crossed roads to get here and refused to be moved again. One man spoke of authority, of records kept far away in offices that smelled of ink and dust. Another spoke of fairness, his tone practiced and smooth. A third watched without speaking, eyes measuring, perhaps wondering which way the wind would turn. The rancher noticed the late rider lean in when the woman mentioned a creek crossing and a survey line that never matched the lay of the land. That detail mattered. It was the kind of thing only someone who had walked the ground would know. From a different angle, a neighbor stood back, hat brim low, listening. He had no stake on paper, but he had seen how the ranch was kept, how gates were closed behind you, how help arrived when storms cut the road. He wondered if loyalty counted for anything when weighed against stamps and signatures. He wondered if speaking up would cost him more than silence. The woman felt the old pressure return, the kind that tried to make her small. She focused on the creek's sound, steady and honest. She remembered learning the value of a boundary stone, how it marked not just land, but intent. When a man questioned her memory, she answered with dates and distances, with a calm that surprised even her. The rancher heard her voice and felt a surge of pride he did not yet name. The talk broke for a moment as rain thickened. Someone suggested moving under the trees. Another suggested postponing. The rancher said no. Delays had teeth. He said they would finish what they started. Felt eyes on him then, weighing whether resolve could stand in for leverage. A paper was produced that claimed a strip of land along the creek. The rancher asked who walked it last. Silence answered. He asked who paid to mend the fence after the last flood. More silence. The late rider cleared his throat and said he had ridden that line the previous spring and found markers out of place. Said it quietly, without flourish. It was enough to tilt the balance just a little. Still, nothing settled. The men spoke of reviews and committees, of letters to be sent. The rancher knew that path led to months of uncertainty, to pressure applied in private. He glanced at the woman. She nodded once. She was ready. They agreed to a temporary measure that pleased no one. The fence would remain as set. The papers would be examined. Another meeting would be called. It was a pause, not a peace. As they mounted, the rancher felt the weight of eyes on his back. He also felt the land under him, steady despite the rain. The ride home was quiet. Water dripped from hats and coats. When the ranch came into view, the woman let out a breath she had been holding since dawn. The dogs met them at the gate, tails low but hopeful. Inside, they dried off and set two simple tasks. Normal work had a way of stitching nerves back together. News traveled faster than the creek. By evening, a visitor arrived with concern wrapped in advice. He spoke of caution, of choosing battles. The rancher listened and thanked him. After the man left, the woman asked if he regretted standing firm. He said no, not even a little. He said regret grew best in places where fear was allowed to decide. That night, a light burned in the barn longer than usual. The rancher checked tack and counted feed, habits that calmed his hands. The woman sat at the table and organized papers into neat stacks. Each document felt like a stone placed carefully in a wall. She wondered if walls could keep out everything. She wondered if they were meant to. The next days brought small tests. A delivery failed to arrive. A buyer asked for assurances that could not be given yet. The rancher adjusted, trading favors and patience. He did not complain. He did not bend. The woman noticed how he carried himself through town, steady and fair. It made her think of a future that did not require running. At the same time, shadows moved at the edges. Tracks appeared again by the south fence, lighter now, as if someone wanted to be seen. The rancher repaired a gate and left it clean. No sign of alarm. He told the woman to keep the papers close. She told him she would. From the creek, the late rider returned alone one afternoon. He asked to speak. He said he had looked into the surveys and found inconsistencies. He said there were others who would back that claim if pressed. He also said pressure would come first. He advised readiness. The rancher thanked him and offered coffee. The man declined and rode out, leaving possibility in his wake. A subplot unfolded quietly in the barn. The woman took to the horses, learning their moods, earning trust with patience. One mare favored her, leaning into the brush, breathing slow. The rancher watched and felt something ease. Trust, he realized, could grow even under threat. Another angle emerged from town. Clerk sent word that a file had gone missing and then returned. It bore a new note, cautious but present. The rancher recognized a shift, not victory, but movement. He shared the news. The woman smiled and then stopped herself as if joy might jinx the moment. Still, tension held. A rider passed the ranch at dusk and did not wave. A letter arrived that asked for cooperation again, the words sharper now. The rancher set it aside. He went out to mend a fence in the failing light, hands working without thought. The woman joined him, holding staples, passing tools. The work bound them in a way talk could not. They spoke then of smaller things, of how mornings smelled after rain, of a creek in winter and how it sang differently, of a future that was a question, not a plan. The rancher said he had not expected his life to change so late. She said she had not expected it to feel like home. The words hung between them, tender and dangerous. Another meeting was called, closer this time, in town.
Oh.
The rancher agreed to attend. He knew the ground would be different there. He also knew he would not go alone. As they prepared, neighbors stopped by with offers of help that did not ask for anything in return. The rancher felt the quiet power of community gather, slow and sure. On the morning of the meeting, the sky cleared. Sunlight broke across the pasture, lighting the grass like a promise. The woman folded the papers one last time and tucked them into her coat. The rancher checked the horses and closed the gate behind them. As they rode toward town, he felt the future pull tight, like a rope drawn between posts. He did not know if it would hold.
Oh.
He knew he would not let go. They reached the edge of town as bells rang the hour. Faces turned. Whispers followed. The rancher dismounted and offered his hand. The woman took it. Inside the hall, voices rose and fell, arguments ready to be made. The air smelled of dust and resolve. As the door closed behind them, the tension gathered into a single breath, waiting to see whether the ground would finally speak loud enough to be heard. The room felt smaller once the door closed. Wooden benches creaked as people shifted, and the sound carried more than it should have. Dust floated in the sunlight coming through the high windows, turning the air thick and slow. The rancher stood still, hat in his hands, eyes moving across faces he knew, and some he did not. The woman stayed close, not hiding, not pushing forward either. She felt the weight of the moment settle into her chest like a stone. A man at the front cleared his throat and began speaking about order and procedure. His voice was calm, but it carried a warning beneath it. Papers were placed on the table, stacked neatly, as if their weight alone could decide the truth. The rancher listened, jaw tight, knowing every word spoken here could bend the future of his land and his life. Round them murmurs rose and fell, opinions forming before facts could land. When it was his turn to speak, the rancher did not rush. He talked about the creek, about fences repaired after storms, about seasons measured by work, not ink. He spoke plainly, without anger, and the room leaned in despite itself. He mentioned community, how land was more than lines on a page. The woman watched faces soften and harden in turns, like clouds passing over a field. Then someone challenged him. The voice came sharp, accusing him of holding what was not his. The rancher felt the words hit like a slap, but he did not answer right away. He looked to the woman, just for a breath, then back to the room. He asked a single question about who had last walked the boundary in question. Silence followed, heavy and telling. The woman stepped forward then, heart racing, hands steady. She spoke of markers shifted by floods, of stones placed by hands long gone. Her voice did not shake. She told them she had walked that land with care, counted her steps, watched the way water cut its path. Some listened closely, others looked away, uneasy with knowledge that did not come from authority. From the back of the room, a neighbor spoke up. He did not raise his voice. He simply said he had seen the rancher work that stretch of land for years and never once take what was not his. Another voice joined, then another. Support gathered slowly, like a tide you did not notice until your boots were wet. Still, the men at the table were not ready to bend. They spoke of reviews again, of decisions made elsewhere. One of them slid a paper forward that suggested temporary control of the disputed land. Temporary was a word that could last a lifetime. The rancher felt heat rise in his chest. He knew this move. It was pressure dressed as compromise. Outside, a sudden gust rattled the windows. The sound pulled everyone's attention for a moment. The woman thought of the horses tied out back, of the way they sensed storms before people did. She wondered if this was one of those moments when everything leaned toward change, whether ready or not. The late rider arrived then, breathless, hat in hand. He apologized for the interruption and placed a rolled map on the table. He spoke quickly but clearly, pointing out lines that did not match older records. He mentioned witnesses willing to speak if needed. The room stirred again, tension tightening like a rope pulled too far. The men at the table exchanged looks. Ow! One of them frowned, tapping a finger against the wood. The rancher watched carefully. This was the moment when power decided whether to listen or to crush. He felt the woman's shoulder brush his arm, a small reminder that he was not standing alone. Questions followed, sharp and pointed. The rider answered what he could. The woman added details when asked. The rancher stayed quiet now, letting the truth do its work. Sweat traced a line down his back, unnoticed. He felt every second stretch thin. At last, a decision was postponed, not denied, not granted. Postponed until further review, with conditions that felt like a tightening net. The rancher heard the words and understood their danger. He nodded anyway. Pushing harder here could turn the room against him. Sometimes survival meant choosing the right moment to hold your ground. As people stood and gathered their things, the air buzzed with unfinished arguments. Outside, voices spilled into the street. Some clapped the rancher on the shoulder. Others avoided his eyes. The woman stepped into the sunlight and felt it warm her face, though her stomach remained knotted. On the ride back, neither spoke at first. Hooves struck the road in a steady rhythm. The rancher replayed every exchange in his mind, searching for cracks. The woman watched the horizon, thinking about how close they had come to losing everything and how far they still had to go. When they reached the ranch, they found a gate left open that should have been closed. The rancher dismounted quickly, scanning the pasture. Nothing was missing, but the message was clear. Someone was testing them. The woman felt a chill despite the sun. This was no longer just about land. It was about pressure and fear. That night, they ate in near silence. The dogs lay close, alert. The rancher checked the fences twice before dark. He told the woman to rest, but she stayed up, sorting papers again, memorizing every detail. Sleep came in short pieces, broken by the sound of wind and distant movement. Next days pressed harder. A buyer backed out without explanation. Supplies arrived late. A stranger rode past the ranch more than once, slow enough to be noticed. The rancher kept working, fixing what he could, refusing to show strain. Inside, the tension coiled tighter with each passing hour. One afternoon, the neighbor who had spoken up in the hall arrived with news. He said there were rumors of a forced survey, one that would favor those with influence. He said it would happen soon. The rancher thanked him and walked the length of the disputed land again, measuring with his eyes in memory. The woman followed, noting every marker, every bend in the creek. As evening fell, clouds gathered low and dark. The air grew heavy, charged. The rancher felt it in his bones. Storms did not ask permission. Neither did change. He secured the barn and brought the horses in early. The woman stood in the doorway, watching the sky, feeling the future press close. When the rain came, it came hard.
Ow.
Water rushed through the creek, rising fast. The rancher and the woman ran out together, checking the fence near the bank. The ground shifted underfoot, slick and dangerous. In the chaos, a marker stone loosened, tipping dangerously close to the water. The woman saw it first. She shouted, pointing, and the rancher understood at once. That stone mattered. Its loss could rewrite everything. Without thinking, they moved toward it together, fighting the rain and the pull of the current. Mud sucked at their boots. Wind tore at their coats. Behind them, a shape appeared in the dark, another figure moving fast. Whether friend or threat, there was no time to tell. The rancher reached for the stone, hands straining, while the woman braced herself against him, lending her weight. The creek roared, the storm howled, and the future balanced on a moment that could tip either way. The storm showed no mercy. Rain pelted their faces, turning sight into blur and footing into slick uncertainty. The creek swelled with each passing minute, its water now a roaring ribbon, threatening to swallow anything that dared to cross. The rancher's hands gripped the marker stone as tightly as he could, muscles straining against mud and wind. Every second felt stretched, as if the world had slowed to measure their courage and resolve. The woman stayed close, her hands steady on his arm, her boots sinking deep into the wet earth as they worked together to prevent the stone from toppling into the furious current. Behind them, the figure in the shadows emerged more clearly, another rider, or perhaps someone sent to watch, to test their strength, or to see if they would falter. The rancher's heart pounded, but he did not flinch. He had learned long ago that fear could be acknowledged without surrendering to it. The woman whispered something, not quite audible above the storm, but enough to remind him she was there. He nodded once, acknowledging the silent courage she carried, the same courage he saw mirrored in his own reflection in her eyes. As the marker stone finally settled into place, mud smeared across both their hands, the creek seemed to surge higher, threatening to erase the careful work they had done. The wind tore at their clothes, soaked through them to the skin, but still, neither moved back. Each of them knew that the land, like life, demanded persistence. One misstep could undo everything, but retreat was not an option. Not now, not ever. The mysterious figure moved closer, boots squelching in the mud. The rancher realized then that this encounter was no accident. Someone had come to test not just the boundaries of his land, but the boundaries of his patience, of his resolve, of his ability to protect what mattered. And the woman tightened her grip on his arm, and he felt the pulse of shared determination. Whatever was coming, they would meet it together. Suddenly, a shout cut through the storm. Voices from the ridge above, men calling, some in anger, some in warning. They had come to claim what they believed was theirs. The rancher stepped forward, letting the woman move slightly behind him, but close enough that their shadows intertwined in the flicker of lightning. The storm illuminated faces, some unfamiliar, some too familiar, all watching the land that had become more than property, had become their stand, their proof that resilience and care could withstand any challenge. One of the men tried to wade into the water to reach the marker. The rancher's voice, loud and steady, carried across the chaos. He warned them back, not threatening, but firm. The words seemed to hang, buoyed by the wind and the sound of rushing water. For a moment, no one moved. Then a horse whinnied from the ridge, startled by the thunder, and tension twisted tighter in the space between them. The woman spoke, her voice clear and deliberate now. She recounted details of the land, of the surveys, of the fences and markers that had been placed and maintained with care. Every word was a shield, a declaration of knowledge and ownership rooted in truth, not ink. The men on the ridge hesitated, unsure how to respond to someone who spoke with certainty and experience, someone who understood not only the land but the lives tied to it. Their hesitation was brief, but it bought precious seconds. The creek's roar intensified. Water surged over the edge in places, threatening to carry debris downstream. The rancher moved closer to the bank, feeling the mud shift underfoot, called for the woman to stay behind, but she refused. Together, they braced against the storm, their presence a single statement of defiance. Each second was a battle, each movement a declaration that they would not allow intimidation or threat to claim what they had nurtured. The mysterious figure drew closer, now fully visible in the slashing rain. It was a man with authority, face set in lines of judgment and expectation. Papers were in his hand, meant to represent law, meant to represent power. The rancher met his eyes, steady and unyielding. The woman stepped beside him, quiet but resolute, and the three formed a tense triangle of wills, each unwilling to yield, but aware that the next move could tip the balance irreversibly. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the entire scene for an instant. Shadows danced across the creek in the mud, making the stakes feel larger than life. The rancher spoke again, calm but firm. He explained the work done on the land, the hours spent, the fences mended, the boundaries maintained. He spoke of truth as more than ink on paper, truth lived in care and attention, in the hands that shaped the land without greed. The woman added her knowledge, each detail precise, undeniable.
All the men
Who had come to intimidate could not argue with proof that existed in action and not just assertion. Rain poured harder. Mud sucked at boots, river water threatened to pull at the edges of the creek bank, and yet the rancher and the woman stood unyielding. Every heart in the group felt the tension stretch thinner than wire. Arguments began to rise again, but the storm drowned some words before they could land. The rancher realized that nature itself was an ally, testing all involved equally, forcing clarity and focus in a way that no discussion alone could. From the edge of the creek, the neighbor who had once spoken in their favor arrived. He was soaked through, but his eyes carried determination, positioned himself beside the rancher, offering silent support that added weight to their stance. More neighbors appeared, some cautiously, some boldly, drawn by loyalty and understanding of the land's value beyond ownership. Their presence shifted the power subtly, reminding the men on the ridge that they were not facing a lone pair, but a community that had stakes beyond paper. Tension climbed as the storm reached its peak. Water swirled around boots, lightning flashed in blinding arcs, and thunder rolled like a drum, marking time in heavy beats. The men with claims hesitated, glancing at one another. The authority figure raised his hand, signaling for order, but the woman's gaze, unwavering, challenged him without words. She spoke again, calmly, each sentence precise and deliberate, recounting the history of the land and the rightful care that had sustained it. The creek threatened to breach the fence line entirely. The rancher and the woman moved in sync, bracing posts, reinforcing loose boards, and securing the marker stone. Their hands were raw, muscles burning, mud and water soaking them through, yet neither wavered. Every eye in the group watched, some with growing respect, some with suspicion. But all aware that what they were witnessing was more than a dispute, it was determination incarnate. Finally, as the storm reached its most violent crescendo, the men on the ridge made a move. A rider tried to reach the marker from the high ground, boots slipping, mud giving way beneath him. The rancher stepped forward, heart racing, muscles taut. The woman followed instantly, not holding back, and together they prevented a disaster. The rider stopped, realizing the stakes were higher than expected, realizing that the land itself would not bend without resistance. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the roar of the creek and the wind's whistle. Every person present felt the weight of what had just passed. Decisions were waiting, yes, but they would not be made lightly now. The rancher, the woman, and the neighbors stood wet and exhausted, victorious in presence, if not in resolution. Yet the tension remained, a wire stretched tight, awaiting the final act that would decide the future of the land, their lives, and the bond that had formed under pressure and storm. As the storm began to ease, clouds lifting just enough to reveal the first hints of twilight, the rancher looked at the woman. She met his gaze, expression unreadable but resolute. Both understood that the real challenge was not over. The papers, the claims, the authority figures, they remained. But something unspoken had shifted. They had proven that together they could face what came next. And in that knowledge, even as the creek continued to rage and the wind whispered of more trials, hope pressed close, waiting for the moment when action and courage would meet resolution. The next step, the decision that would seal everything, was coming, and both of them knew they had to be ready.